An antidote to the bitter pill of cuts and austerity. If you are a prospective parliamentary candidate knocking on the doors, it's going to be a difficult sell. Susan?
It's not going to be easy, but, I mean, they have faced up to the problems this week, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, Gordon Brown last week talked about all the expenditure that they were going to make, but didn't actually say how they were going to address this huge deficit.
But he has been brought around to using the C word, hasn't he? The cuts word. He was avoiding that for quite a while. He's admitted that.
Yeah, he didn't use it at conference, but he has been brought around to using it. But I think, you know, what the public do want is a bit of honesty. I mean, if, you know, we'd had another week of a party conference where the leader had not mentioned the huge elephant in the room, which is the vast deficit in the public purse, then I would have been really disappointed.
Bit of a gamble, though, Dr. Russell.
Yeah, it's a very interesting conference, this one, because previously the Conservatives have been trying to show that they're taking the game to Labour. This one is about the kind of safety-first approach, that they want to show that they're a kind of responsible government in waiting. And so some of the tactics that have seen the Conservatives make ground in previous years have to be abandoned. They have to look like they've got some plans. They have to look like they're not just knocking the government. They have to look like the government in waiting. So just even the geometry of the speech today will be different. So you know, so he probably, I don't know, but I suspect he won't be wandering around the stage. It'll be much more statesmanlike. It'll be much more kind of considered, and he'll try to show that he's the Prime Minister in waiting, I think.
Paul Foley's with us. He's a Unison representative. Paul, the Chancellor in waiting said that there would be a pay freeze on public sector workers who earn above £18,000, necessary to secure their jobs, he said.
Yes, it's very interesting, that. I mean, I wish the majority of public sector workers could afford a £150 bottle of champagne, but unfortunately they can't. And the reality is the situation that Osborne says we're all in this together, and it's a nice soundbite, isn't it? But what he's actually saying is the disproportionate response is going to be with public sector workers. And he doesn't identify who those public sector workers are. You know, he says
anybody earning over £18,000 a year.
So
that's fairly identifying, isn't it?
Are we talking about a nurse? Are we talking about police? Are we talking about ambulance drivers? Are we talking about who's actually going to have this pay freeze? Basically, everybody. We didn't call
except frontline forces.
Except for frontline forces, yeah, but he's got to encourage people to go off and fight a war somehow, and of course, cutting their pay wouldn't go down very, very well, would it?
But surely his argument was that if he doesn't take this decisive action, their jobs will be under threat. Better to know you're going to earn what you're going to earn on a pay freeze than be out of a job in 12 months' time.
But it's very interesting. Osborne hasn't said that, has he? Osborne hasn't said we will guarantee that no public sector worker will lose their job. Up and down the country, and certainly in Greater Manchester, you know, universities are drawing up plans to make redundancies, health authorities are saying they can't afford it and jobs are at risk, and there's no guarantee that those jobs still won't disappear. So we'll cut their wages, because that's what a pay freeze will be. We will cut their wages, and they may lose their job as well in this situation. But we need to, you know, all the panel have said it, and the politicians are saying that we have to cut. Why do we have to cut? Why do we have the deficit? Nobody's asking the question of why do we have the deficit. You know, it's the bankers, it's the greedy, it's the casino bosses out there that got us into this situation.
Okay.
So why do public sector workers have to carry the can? The nurses, the doctors, the care workers. And I think that's the question that the politicians need to address.
Well, let's ask our Labour politician, because for 12 years we've had a Labour government and we've ended up with £175 billion worth of debt, Graham Stringer.
Well, there's two issues. One is that if the banks had gone to the wall, virtually every public sector worker would have been out of a job. That's why that amount of money had to be put into the banks. You can't run a modern society without banks. They'd made a mistake, they'd been greedy, and they had to be rescued. If they hadn't have been rescued, holes in the wall wouldn't have had £10 notes in them and people wouldn't have been paid. So that amount of expenditure is there. Secondly, you know, George Osborne says that this government didn't mend the roof while the sun was shining. The reality was that public services, the health service, universities, education, transport that we talked about before, had been left underinvested in, and the Labour government has put that right by trebling the investment into the health service